ثم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إنهم فتية آمنوا بربهم وزدناهم هدى رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم ثبتنا عند الموت بلا إله إلا الله آمين يا رب العالمين. Assalamu Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm very pleasantly surprised to be back here. I didn't recognize the place, mashallah. May Allah continue to bless the project of Masjid Maryam and help the cause of raising the right kind of money and also the cause of raising the right kind of children in this community, inshallah. What I was asked to speak about rather was the matter of youth, and the title given was Strangers, Questions of Youth. And whenever the issue of youth comes up for me personally, I like to give my talks in a very organized fashion and keep my thoughts composed and organized. When it comes to youth, there are so many concerns that bombard my mind, and there's so much that I want to say that I almost feel overwhelmed to be able to communicate the matter effectively. But if you want to break it down, at the very least there are two things. We need to be talking about the youth, and we need to be talking to the youth. At the very least, we can organize our thoughts in those two ways. So in this talk that I have to share with you, there are some things that I'm going to be saying about the youth, and there are certain things that I'll be saying to the youth. So in that way, inshallah ta'ala, some of both of those things will get addressed. I'll start by just an appreciation of how important this topic, this discussion is. Young people are the lifeblood of this ummah. If we don't have a strong body of young people that are carrying the torch of Islam, we no longer have Islam. They are the most important asset, the most valuable commodity in the possession of the Muslim community. There's nothing more valuable, there's nothing more powerful, and nothing more valuable, and nothing more precious, and at the same time, nothing more delicate. So as we are all over this country trying to raise our children and raise families and establish institutions and masajid and learning institutions, etc., the thing that should never lose our focus, the priority that should never lose itself in the midst of all of our other priorities is that this is supposed to be building a strong future generation. And every single obstacle that gets in the way of us raising a strong next generation or addressing the problems that are making the current young generation weak, or even having it disappear from the faces of, from the presence in the masajid and the Islamic community, what are those obstacles that are making them disappear, and how do we address them? These are priorities. This is a very important matter. And so one of the first things I wanted to do, because I don't want to just ramble off the top of my head once again, I want to share with you whether this issue is a concern in the Quran or not. Is the issue of making youth a priority and understanding their value, and Allah appreciating the value of a young person, a man or a woman, that stands up for their religion no matter what their society does. Is there a value given to them in the Quran? That is the reason actually I recited in Maghrib Salah, in both rak'ah, I recited from Suratul Kahf. And in Suratul Kahf there are 4 stories, but I recited only from the first story. And this is the story, famously, the story of the people of the cave. The people of the cave. And the ayah in the beginning of this talk that I recited was one small part of that, where Allah Azza wa Jalla says, إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ. There is no doubt they were young people who had iman, who had real faith in their master and their Lord. Allah Azza wa Jalla could have just said, no doubt they believed in their Lord. He could have just said that. This is kalamullah, nothing is extra. So what does he make a point to do? To mention innahum, not just innahum amanu bi rabbihim, but innahum fitya amanu bi rabbihim. Fata in Arabic is a young person. Fitya, a group of young people. Allah makes sure He gives credit to them that no matter what their society was doing, these young people, and young people is important because young people are very impressionable. They take the most influence from the outside world. They take the most impact from the outside world. What they see around them changes the way they speak, the way they dress, the way they talk, the way they interact, who they hang out with. All of that is influenced from the outside. Very little of it is actually from within themselves. Most of it is from the outside. So when these young people are able to repel all those influences and still hold on to their iman, then Allah has to give them credit subhanahu wa ta'ala in the ayah with the word fitya. إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ وَزِدْنَاهُمْ هُدًى. And if they were able to hold on to their iman in such harsh conditions, what gift did Allah give them? وَزِدْنَاهُمْ هُدًى. We increased them in terms of guidance. Allah guided them even more. They were in a society that was misguided, so everything around them was calling towards misguidance. But because they themselves were committed, Allah saw their commitment, So Allah gave them the gift of making them even more guided, regardless of their surroundings, regardless of the temptations and the tendencies of their society. But now let's come back to talking about the youth in our time. I wanted to make a brief mention of the young people in Suratul Kahf, and we'll talk about a few lessons from there, inshallah. I'll just drop some of them. But I want to come back to 2010, soon to be 2011, and just the reality of Muslim youth in our society. The first thing I want to say is that Muslims in general, we like to think of things, in some respects, we like to think of things as better than they really are. In some sense we're pessimists, but in other sense we're optimists. And sometimes we are delusional optimists. In other words, we hope to think things are okay, even if they're not okay. Right? So even if, just to give you an extreme example, you smell the smoke, you're coughing in the house, the fire alarm's gone off, and you're sitting on the second floor going, yeah, she's just cooking something extra. You don't want to face reality. If there's smoke, you better go check if there's a fire. You have to be cautious and aware of the reality around you. Now, I've spoken about this a few times before, but I don't mind repeating myself. There are three major tendencies in this society. If you want to understand the problem of young Muslims in this country, you have to understand at least these three tendencies. Three things that are a part of American society and are quickly becoming a part of the global society. So you can't even run away from it and go somewhere else and you won't hit it. It won't hit you there. It's becoming global. What are those three things? The first of those three things is a proliferation of shamelessness. Shamelessness is becoming widespread. It's becoming common. In Islam, the standards of shame are constant. They don't change. What was shameless 1,000 years ago is still shameless. What was inappropriate then is still inappropriate now. It doesn't change by the year. It doesn't change by the society. Allah sends us standards that don't change. They're set in stone, if you will. But I'm talking about the spread of shamelessness even by the standards of non-Muslims. 100 years ago, America was a lot more shameless than it is now. 50 years ago, it was a lot more shameful than it is now. 25 years ago, there was a lot more modesty in this society than there is now. Over the years, with the advent of technology and mass communication, what has also been mass communicated is shamelessness. What comes with it is shamelessness. And so, using filthy language, seeing filth on a screen, seeing filth outside, seeing filth at school, seeing filth at college, at the workplace, on a billboard, on your handheld devices with internet connections, right? Seeing things on your laptop or your TV, etc., etc. That has become very common. Shamelessness has become just commonplace. Now the thing is, the reason I want to mention that is, when something happens all the time, you know what happens to you? You get used to it. When you see something all the time, it doesn't shock you. I don't come to this masjid every day. So when I came here after all this time, and I saw new construction for a moment, I was like, wow, this is amazing. But you people who come here every day, you don't say that. You don't every day you come here and say, wow, that's pretty sweet. You don't do that. You get used to it. You get adjusted. So what I'm trying to say is, in our society, we have to some extent become accustomed to shamelessness. This was something that was never the case with the Muslim. The Muslim at the even getting close to language that is shameless. Allah doesn't even talk about, lowering your gaze, keeping your eyes low, keeping your modesty, the way you dress, the way you speak. That's talked about in the Quran, but Allah goes a step further in places like Suratul Hujurat. With a shameless society comes shameless language, bad language, filthy language, cussing and foul language, things like that, swearing. Allah says, even mention of filthy words. Even the noun, the noun that is filthy, the word that is filthy, in and of itself, that is terrible once you have iman. This is how sensitive the society of faith is supposed to be. And by the way, when you get accustomed to corruption, when you see corruption and it doesn't bother you over here, then what does it mean? That the hearts have become hard. That means that the hearts are no longer soft. And when the hearts are not soft, what has become definitely weak? Iman has. Taqwa has. The fear of Allah is here. The faith in Allah is here. So if the fear of Allah is gone, then you won't have a problem looking at something and not looking the other way, because there's no longer any fear of Allah. The more you look at it, the more shameless you become, the harder your heart gets. That's one tendency in this society, the widespreading of shamelessness. The second tendency in this society is extreme individualism. Extreme individualism. What I mean by that is, you ever heard the expression, looking out for number one? You don't care about anybody but yourself. You just worry about yourself. What am I going to wear? What am I going to dress like? What